All right. Anybody ever had a funny prediction that you've heard or that you said that did not come to pass? Anybody ever had a prediction? Anybody ever said the Cowboys are going to win the Super Bowl this year? Don't throw anything if you're a Cowboys fan. I mean, I don't know anybody who would have predicted Texas Tech winning their football game yesterday. Any predictions you've heard? Just kind of like, there's been a couple, those people out there who say the world's going to end, right? It's kind of strange. Prophesied that, and we're still here. So, didn't work.
Lots of predictions on the president.
Yes, lots of predictions on who's going to win what race, right? Pretty much all of them were wrong again. Anybody predict that 2020 was going to be your best year ever? That would be good. I somewhat predicted, but didn't do it on purpose yesterday, that we were going down to Shelly's parents' house, and I said, "Hey, do you think your mom's going to have a roast again for lunch down there?" And sure enough, she had a roast. She does every time. Come down and eat. And we just ate. Come on, you got to eat anyway. Come on, eat. So, in terms of predictions, would you rather know how you will die or when you will die? If you had that ability. When?
Yeah, my life insurance the day before. Great.
Yep. Love it. Looking at the positives. Buy life insurance before. You know how much time you have, right? Kind of get things in order. Nobody wants to know how you're going to die?
No. You try to beat it and you can't.
Yeah, I know. Because I was thinking, if it's electricity, I'm just going to not be around any electricians, no around plugs. But yeah, you're right. It's just going to, happen if it's water or whatever it is, right? There's a third option, right? I'd rather know neither of those things, right? So, in terms of the future, Matthew 6:34, Jesus said, "Don't worry about tomorrow, take care of today." Tomorrow's going to have enough problems of its own, right? That's why we don't have prophecy, right? So there's there's not prophecy, today because of those types of things. So, but just that kind of leads into our lesson, right? That prophecy that Jesus told Ananias about Paul, right? Back into week 2, we talked about that. The fulfillment of that prophecy and how it's going to continue to unfold. Don't remember, so we'll talk about that here in a minute. Paul didn't necessarily know how or when, right? But he did know it was not going to be good. He was going to get persecuted, and then he was going to die. So, but Paul wasn't afraid of death. He was not afraid of it. He just marched right into it. Just like everything we keep talking about him, he's bold, right? He just goes right in. So, he wasn't afraid of death. Paul was more afraid of people not knowing about Christ. That's what he was more afraid of, I think. In Romans 9, verse 3, he said, "For I could wish that I myself were cursed and cut off from Christ for the sake of my brothers, my kinsmen according to the flesh." He would rather be cut off from Christ than have somebody not know about Jesus. That's how much he wanted that. So let's go back to Jesus' prophecy. In Acts 9:15 through 16. But the Lord said to him, speaking of Ananias, "Go, for he, Paul, is a chosen instrument of mine to carry my name before the Gentiles and the kings and the children of Israel. For I will show him how much he must suffer for the sake of my name." Right? So Jesus told Ananias that Paul's going to suffer. There's also going to be a great witness, right? There's these two sides. Great witness. Paul's going to suffer. It's going to be tough. We're going to talk about one of those today. So one of those times. All right. So if you'll turn to Acts 21, verse 10 through 14, that's where we're going to start today. Acts 21, starting in verse 10. while we were staying for many days, a prophet named Agabus came down from Judea. And coming to us, he took Paul's belt and he bound his own feet and hands, and he said, "Thus says the Holy Spirit, this is how the Jews at Jerusalem will bind the man who owns this belt and deliver him into the hands of the Gentiles." When we heard this, we and the people there urged him not to go up to Jerusalem. Then Paul answered, "What are you doing? Weeping and breaking my heart? For I am ready not only to be imprisoned, but even to die in Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Jesus." And since he would not be persuaded, he ceased and said, "Let the will of the Lord be done." How do you relate to Paul's reaction in verse 13? How do you relate to that? Go back and read that again. Then Paul answered, "What are you doing, weeping and breaking my heart? For I am ready not only to be imprisoned, but even to die in Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Jesus." How do you relate to that?
This makes me think of my dad after our car wreck. When he finally had his last surgery and was doing well, he went to India, and everybody said, he doesn't need to do that. Why is he doing this? He's just now healthy. And we were like, but that's what he wants to do. And if he dies doing that, and we even discussed it before he left, if he were to die over there, we're just going to leave him there. We're not going to pay to ship him, all that. That's his second home. That's his love. So why bother? And if he dies doing mission work, what a better way to go.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same exact thing.
He's in line with Paul here. He kind of relates to him. Anybody not relate to Paul? If you heard that you were going to be bound up and everything, would you go, "Thanks for that. I am not going that way. I'm going to go this way. I'm going to be like Jonah. I'm out. Thanks. Thanks for the, for the warning or the tips," right?
Yeah, because I think most of us would respond and say, "Well, that's God warning me not to go."
Yeah.
We rationalize it and
Yeah, we wouldn't go to India. So
self-preservation. Yeah.
we wouldn't go down there if I knew I was going to get bound up. I was going to get thrown into prison. Going to get all these things. Probably most of us are the opposite, right? At this time.
It's easier to relate to the other people, that are begging him not to go.
Yeah. I mean, you hear all these words, you hear things over and over and over. Don't go, don't go, don't go. Okay, I better not go. Right? But he read it the other way, right? So, yeah. How many of us, when you hear something, you hear the challenge, we're like, I didn't sign up for this. I didn't sign up to be in prison. I didn't sign up to get beat. I didn't get signed up to be killed. This is not what I signed up for, right? This is not, for me. So, but I encourage you, are you growing towards that? Is that on your prayer list? Is it on your prayer list to go somewhere and challenge? Is it on your prayer list to get beat? Is it on your prayer list to get in prison because you're speaking up for things? Oh, that was then. This is now, Bryan. That's different, right? Well, let's change it a little bit. Well, what about your job? Are you okay to speak up at your job? That you might lose it, that you get fired. If your boss came in and asked you, not a lot of accountants in here, but if you got asked to doctor the books, right? You got asked to do something that, it's not so much. Are you okay to speak up and lose your job? Are you okay to lose your finances? Is there somebody that you need to speak to, right? Those challenges. What are you holding back from God? What are you not praying about? So let's move on to Acts 21, verse 27. So we're going to scoot down a little bit there to verse 27. We're going to read all the way through 36. So when the 7 days were almost completed, the Jews from Asia, seeing him in the temple, Paul, stirred up the whole crowd and laid hands on him. This is not the good hand laying on. So just to verify that for you. So, and they cried out, "Men of Israel, help. This is the man who's teaching everyone everywhere." You like that? Everyone everywhere? They're just blanketing the whole thing, right? "Against the people and the law in this place. Moreover, he even brought Greeks into the temple, and he has defiled this holy place." For they had previously seen Trophimus, the Ephesian, with him in the city, and they supposed, yes, right, that Paul had brought him into the temple. Then all the city was stirred up, and the people ran together. They seized Paul and dragged him out of the temple. I don't know if anybody's ever been dragged before, but that's no fun, I'm sure. They dragged him out of the temple, and at once the gates were shut. And as they were seeking to kill him, word came to the tribune of the cohort that all Jerusalem was in confusion. The tribune is basically the army commander over that particular town. He at once took soldiers and centurions and ran down to them. And when they saw the tribune and the soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. Then the tribune came up and arrested him and ordered him to be bound with 2 chains. He inquired who he was and what he had done. Some of the crowd were shouting one thing, some another. And as he could not learn the facts because of the uproar, he ordered him to be brought into the barracks, jail. And when he came to the steps, he was actually carried by the soldiers because of the violence of the crowd. So imagine paparazzi all around, right? And for the mob of the people followed crying out, "Away with him." So what's happened to Paul throughout these verses? What all's been happening to him?
He got beat.
He got beat, he got dragged. He got the full gambit of the prophecy, right? Prophecy's coming true.
Maybe so much so that, maybe he wasn't moving very fast because he's been beaten, so they had to pick him up and carry him so they could get away from the crowd.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, this whole crowd's around him, guards are coming. Let's see. We'll kind of go back through here, right? They laid hands on him. They're just, they started pounding on him. They're telling lies against him, right? They're saying everything's brought up against him. Let's see. All the city was stirred up. They dragged him out, right? That the gates were shut behind him. They were about to kill him, right? So then looks like the Romans are coming in to save him, but they do what? They stopped the beatings, right? They arrested him, and he was bound with 2 chains. Remember, what did Agabus say? He basically came in, took Paul's belt, he binded himself up and said, "This is what's going to happen to you," and it came true. Right? So, then threw him into jail. Mob of people, all this stuff's happening too. So, which of these things would you rather not have to go through? Of all those things listed, what would you rather not have to go through? Or go through? I told him I could take people yelling at me because that happens in my job today. So.
Probably not both of the meetings.
I'd rather not get beat. That's no fun. What else would you rather not go through?
You'd rather not get thrown in jail, but I'd rather not get beat first, so.
Yeah, jail thing's not gonna really work with my schedule this week, The beatings aren't good. I was the bigger brother in my family, so I did more of the beatings and dragging people. I really haven't experienced that a whole lot, so.
I just find it interesting that the irony of the deal, that's what Paul used to do to everybody else.
Yes, this used to be Paul leading the crowd, Paul dragging people, having people beat, having people stoned, right? Good point.
Maybe a lack of understanding of what he was actually saying. I mean, he's getting accused of going against the Jewish faith completely, but he was trying to tell them of a different faith. So that would probably be just as bad as any of that. They didn't understand. The mob definitely didn't want to try to understand what he was trying to say.
I mean, he was He was trying to speak to people about the word, right? And it just didn't work out. Can you imagine, too, Paul's been to a lot of places where he's had a lot of disciples, a lot of people following. Everything's been working great. And then all of a sudden you come to this place and now things aren't working. And you're thinking, I just did all these things. We were able to get people to follow us. Now I'm talking to somebody who's not. We've talked about that, right? It's going to take a lot of us talking to people to spread the word. And a lot of people are going to tell us no, right? But we need to find that one person who needs to hear God's word. What else?
I suspect that he understood what he was getting into because he was on the other side of that fence, and he knew how the mob mentality would be.
Yeah. Is there anything in this that you would like said about you? Kind of phrase it differently there, right? What would you like said about you?
It's one of those things you wouldn't want to go through, but it's kind of cool to have gone through it, you know, to say, oh, yeah, well, let me tell you about the time.
Yeah. There was that time that I was talking to everybody in the synagogue, and they dragged me out. And I was thrown in jail, so because I was trying to spread God's word. Yeah, it's never fun in the middle of the storm, is it? But afterwards, you know, when it's safe, or when it's a little better, right? It's a little better.
So I was gonna say, it's one thing to get yelled at by somebody at your job or, you know, but think of thousands of people yelling at you, you know. That many people against you and you didn't waver, you know. So that's one of those things when you look back on, you're like, yeah, I went through that.
Yeah.
You know,
I suspect he wasn't too worried about offending people or transgressing their safe place. You know, we kind of have this mentality of afraid to speak truth because we may offend somebody. And so he went right into it.
Yeah, he did. He got right into it.
Well, nobody picks things like this to say that, hey, I'm gonna have a cool story to tell afterwards. But I think God uses, you know, a lot of times when we go through struggles, and I think it's, you know, like our school was saying, it's cool how God uses the stories like that to encourage others afterwards, or when, you know. Does that make sense? To be useful.
Yeah. We go through the trial, and how does God want you to use that, right? Well, a lot of it is to grow us, and we'll continue to talk about that, you know. And then, your story could encourage others, empower others, right?
or how many people in that crowd were changed, you know, because of what they saw and heard, and in a good way, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, too often we're okay to follow until it costs us something, right? We're good there. Jason Thornton, it's the Memorial Drive Church of Christ on his Facebook page. He shared a powerful message, and John Gary shared it on his page. But basically, he tells the story of how Jesus welcomes the storm, and to show how his power is greater than the storm. God uses change and chaos to grow people, like we're talking about here. And we can become better, or we can become bitter, you know. Various keynote speakers I've heard of at different places, they've always, or at least some of the ones that I remember their stories the most, are people who've gone through horrific tragedies, And then they're speaking about it and encouraging people to go through whatever, it is. There was a stewardess, it was around, I believe, 1970. I remember it. She was up there speaking. She was on a plane that was hijacked in Iran, I believe, or Iraq. I can't remember the next place. She was actually one of the first hostages they pulled up and shot, and she fell down off the airplane down to the ground and lay there for about 8 hours before they came and got her. She lived through that, and she speaks about it today. There's a guy from Houston who is a luge, and if you don't know what the luge is, that is you're on a piece of wood or metal, you're sliding down an ice pipe, and that's all. It's just you and a piece of metal between you and the ice. And this guy, he had this horrific wreck, and he got back on that luge. And I'm just always amazed by that. They turn those stories into positives. They're speaking about it, And, at least with some of the speakers I've talked with and joked about, they always have those events, and I don't have anything, right? But those challenges, God asks us to embrace those. Jesus talks about welcoming the storm, right? So that we can grow. If you're not growing, you're dying, right? We talked about that. If you're not going through this challenge, you're going to have one. We need to embrace it and expect it. On the other side, are you afraid? How many times did you check the elections last week and this week to see who's won? How many times did you check your bank account, make sure you got enough money in it? How many times did you check something and we're not relying on God? How many times are we not doing that? All right. So, without a challenge, there is no change, and without change, there is no growth. Without growth, there is death. If you're not growing, you're dying. So, expect the challenges, expect chaos. In Jesus' name is above all name. That's where we need to put our trust. So our quote is, "Great legacy emerges from great difficulty." Great legacy emerges from great difficulty. So what does that mean? What does it mean to you?
It's the inspiration that you see from people that like you're just talking about. That I think that's why it's important to hear those kinds of stories when people go through things, is because it gives you strength for when you're going through something else, or encourages you that in the midst of the storm that it's possible to get through it and to come out and learn something from it. And those kinds of things. I always think of this as, we think, oh, we want God to use us, and you think of these great things of, starting up churches somewhere, or doing these big, huge missionary things. But you look at Paul, and he didn't really start anything big. He was just consistently going through it. He just continued on and continued on and continued on.
Yeah. Didn't have to be anything big. It generally always starts small, but it always will start with the difficulty part right there before the legacy, right?
Well, we always think that we have to go through something major. I mean, we look at those, like, I listen to a lot of motivational and read a lot of motivational books, and they've always gone through something so dramatic and traumatic, and you're like, wow, it's inspiring to hear their story and their change, but that's our everyday battle. And it shouldn't just be, oh, if something big comes up in my life, here's my inspiration to get through it. Because those little things that we go through, that's our legacy too. And how are we teaching our kids to get through that? How are we maintaining through all of that and through everything? We're teaching others, and that's our legacy.
Yeah, teaching our kids. Finding the things that we're still holding on to that we're not giving over to God. That is one that I still struggle with, from time to time. Sitting there and I'm battling with something, and I'm like, why am I not handing this over to Him? Why am I not praying about it? Or why, I got a new thing to add to my, my prayer list now, right? I'm gonna, I need to pray for the challenges and embrace the storms and pray for those. If I'm doing it right, if I'm talking to people, there's going to be a storm, right? I think we talked about this a little bit. If there's not some challenging problem or a storm, that I'm probably not challenging or talking to enough people about God. I'm not getting out there, you know, so, all those things. All right, so our meditation, what are you willing to do for Jesus? What are you willing to do for Jesus? What are you not willing to do for Jesus? The flip side. We talked about it a little bit, but now let's, you know, are you willing to go to prison? Are you willing to lose your job?
I think that's what we see a lot of politics. And I'm not, you know, I'm not saying he knew he was going to go through these things, but he was willing to be uncomfortable, right? He knew that was going to happen. He was going to be uncomfortable. There's going to be good times and bad times. And a lot of times, you know, we like to stay in our little safe zone, and we want something big. But like you said, if we're just looking even the little things, day-to-day stuff, we're going to find trouble. We're going to find stress. We're going to find out of our comfort zone. You know, it's hard enough just to raise kids by yourself, you know, and do what you want to do with your family and those kind of things. Then when you're going out and trying to, you know, teach others about, you know, you become invested in their lives and you become invested with their troubles and their stress, and you know, but that's how we can share in each other's stress as well. But I don't know, just the being uncomfortable with it. You know, I think of like the Wolves. I mean, they got two. I have one girl. I don't know how hard is raising a girl, and they've got two. They're twins, right? And they're sweet kids. And then they invited two more little kids, you know, two little girls, and you know, that's life changing in your family and your dynamic and everything. It's just, you know, just those are the, and they may not seem like big mountainous things, but I'm telling you, it's big in those two little girls' lives.
I keep thinking about how powerful Paul's words must appear to the people around him. You know, we just a little while ago about here he was down around and everybody up, and now he's preaching it. And then what he did ends up in prison. How powerful that was to the people around him. First of all, this is kind of crazy. And if he believes it this much, maybe we should listen. You know, so I think there had to be some impact of the life he lived. You know what I'm saying? And I think it's a challenge to us to maybe look a little crazy.
Yeah. How uncomfortable is it to bring up talking about the word with your family members, right? I've just noticed from time to time, depending on who I'm talking to, you know, you start to see him shifting in the chair, and then you see changing of the subjects, you know, and all those types of things. But, you know, those are small things too, right? But it's time to get uncomfortable, you know, with those things. So, you know, and then you got to think back to why did you decide to follow Jesus, right? Did you, you know, I didn't see this part in the contract, Bryan. I didn't see that when I decided to follow Jesus, you know, that I might have to go to jail. I might have to do those things, right? But it's there, right? Why did you decide to become a Christian? And then reevaluate what you're doing. Why are you here in class? If you're not here to grow, if you're not here for challenges, we need to reevaluate that, right? And start growing towards that, right? We're not all there. I'm nowhere close to that, but I want to continue to grow, and I want to continue to change. I want to continue to spread the word, right? We talked last couple of times that each of us just talked to one person in a year about Christ. One person, and they became a Christian. And they talked to one person, right? That exponentially over 10 years, it hits into the millions of people, right? That is where God's power comes in. We're just planting the seed. And then the last part here, your prayer idea this week: God, let my faith always be greater than my fear. God, I want all my trust to be in you is stronger than my fear. I want to trust in you, God. Right? It's going to be uncomfortable. That's when you know you're doing it the right way. And when things get stirred up, that's how you know even more. This is the example today, and embrace it and just go into it, right? So, Any other thoughts? Everybody say hi to the wolves, I forgot. Turn around and say hi. Any other thoughts?
Brian, I'm thinking about what you just said about how we most of us probably became baptized, I think, especially maybe our generation. You know, we probably did it at a lot earlier age than maybe some of our kids are or have. And I think we did it, it's the right thing to do, you knew why you were doing it. But you don't talk about this, you know, it's supposed to be this great thing, but I think that's what we do need to teach our kids. I think they do need to know the word discipline. It's, you know, you're gonna be challenged, you're gonna be this, and your life is going to be different. It's not gonna be, you know, a walk in the park every day. Because again, it goes back to them handling that and them going through that. And I think of some of the stuff that Kirk and I are doing now with our kids, we want so much good for them. And we want everything to be, you know, just rosy, easy peasy for them. We don't want them to have to be hurt. We don't want them to endure these hardships, but they're not learning. And so it's kind of like I always say, you know, with social media, I want to be able to teach them how to use those things. I want to teach them how to do things that way, and at least it's still under our control, but we're not teaching them how to endure. We're not teaching them to persevere.
That's not gonna be easy. I'm not gonna get that job.
That's the biggest challenge for me personally of all these things is to just not being in control, you know, I mean, just, you know, because you want to be able to, I mean, even if it's something bad, so, well, I'm gonna choose to make this happen, and I'm gonna choose to go through this, but just, you know, whether it's with kids or whatever, it's just that recognition that that's where you need faith, because you don't, we want to control things, that's not possible.
Yeah, I'd like to control the person I'm gonna talk to about God, and this person is going to be receptive to my message, and it's gonna work out great. And the opportunity, the small opportunity God put in my path this week was at the Costco gas station. The little guy the little manager out there, he had just been chewed out by somebody who couldn't get their little card thing to work. And then he was talking to some guy who's headed to the bull riding thing in Arlington this week. And then he came over to me, you know, and I was like, you know, I don't know if people are talking to me now. This guy comes over, and I heard the chewing out, you know, and then it's kind of positive with the cowboy guy here, you know, going to the bulls. They came to Bryan, and this guy, the energy coming out of him was incredible. And I'm like, you just got chewed out. But then his energy is still positive over there. Then he wanted to talk to me, to tell me about just different things, his current boss, people he's been working with, etc. And I just sat there and listened for 10 or 15 minutes and got to talk to him. His name's Scotty. And then just a super nice guy. But the energy out of him changed the rest of the trajectory of my day. You know, I went back and told that story. It was the end of support week, and I had to, you know, speak to about 80, 90 people, you know, on Zoom again. You know, got to tell that story. This guy's changed me. Now I'm going to tell you this story, right? That's, you know, so yeah, it's going to be tough. You know, there's a really good positive story. And I'm going to look for him every time I go back to the Costco gas station, unless I'm in a hurry or something, right? But his energy was infectious. It was just, and I was just like, man, that was really cool, right? But I'm going to be in control of those situations. I'm going to be in control of next time if I get somebody who's not so happy at Costco. The sad Costco gas guy. But is that the opportunity that I get to try to speak to him, you know, and looking for these opportunities? I'm trying really hard to look for the opportunities, right? And then teach, you know, teach my kids, you know, teach my sons, teach all those who are around me who will listen.
Bryan, what is that picture? What's it supposed to be?
That is a fire. I'm just guessing. No, it sounds like I really big up. It says power.
I thought it was that Doctor Strange thing.
Don't go to the.
But I tell you, yeah, don't. I'll ask Sean on the Wednesday night class. I was the only one on the prep class on Wednesday night, so I got to answer every question. It was so much fun. But go and watch, look at Bryan on the hot seat. You can go watch the video. Me and Sean was having a little conversation, him forcing me to answer every question.
That's because you sent him all those questions, so you just
I
didn't
know.
find it.
Right. He's like, Bryan, you sent me, yeah. So I'm still working with Sean on those. We had about 8 to 9 questions, I think, that we're still working through. So.
He just gave you a different me time.
Yeah, yeah. I know. I mean, all these people walking up to me, I saw you on the class, Bryan. And I'm like, any other thoughts, questions this week that you're challenged with? That you're like, hey, I want to do this?
I think, why are we ashamed of our battles? We want to hide them. We don't want people to know we struggle. So instead of asking everybody, how are you doing? It, oh, good, we're fine. Why don't we share them and help each other?
Good question. Why don't we share? Why don't we help? Why don't we give each other courage, power? Anything else? Questions, thoughts? All right. Go forth this week. Have a good week, and come back with some stories. Look forward to hearing from you. Thanks, guys.